So in the last topic, we explored base fears. I introduced the base fears to you. Emotional agility is about understanding these fears in order for us to address them and face them. So we looked at the historical significance of these fears. It's all about survival. We also looked at the important difference between real danger and false evidence appearing real. And finally touched on the idea that, as we have behaviors or develop behaviors to try and avoid these fears, what can happen is we can end up running straight into that fear. As we try and avoid the rocks, we end up landing on the rocks. Now, in this topic, we will explore the ego and fear, more specifically, why the health of the ego matters when it comes to facing fears, and how we can improve the health of the ego. We'll also explore how the ego creates healthy or unhealthy coping behaviors around our base fears and why it does this. See, as we obtain this broader insight, we gain a better understanding as to the source of our behaviors around our fears. So, what is the ego? Well, from a philosophical perspective, our soul, essence, life force, spirit, consciousness, or however you would like to map it in terms of your belief system, is born into this body. And within this body is an operating system, the ego, which ensures we survive here on Earth. Now, with a computer, we do not actually see the operating system, yet it's always operating in the background, and the version or health of the operating system will determine the effectiveness of how the applications are used to perform specific tasks. It's pretty much the same with our operating system, the ego. It operates in the background, in our subconscious, and the health of our ego will determine the effectiveness of how we perform our specific tasks through our behavior. For example, communicating with others, thinking critically or creatively around problems, coming up with solutions, and acting on them. Now, when we are stressed, which fear creates, it'll put the operating system under pressure to perform. If our operating system is unhealthy, it will be unable to deal with this overload on its system and possibly crash, as you will see later in a topic within this module. We will be unable to communicate, to think critically or creatively because we have shut down to what one could say DOS mode, that old basic operating system. Now, when we have a healthy ego, it will be able to continue to work effectively in the background despite this pressure, and we are able to navigate through the fear and challenges that life throws at us. So, what determines the health of our operating system? One could say that there are programs that upgrade or downgrade the effectiveness of our ego, namely our emotions, our thoughts, and our core beliefs. Now, the next question is, how do we manage the health of our ego? Well, it begins with awareness. Awareness of these emotions through emotional agility, the awareness of thoughts and our core beliefs. You see, through this awareness, we then start changing these programs, which improves the health of our ego and consequently our well-being. Let's explore further what is the purpose of this operating system, the ego. Well, as I said previously, it wants us to survive, and it will develop subconscious behaviors to do so. Let's have a look at how it does this. Now, for most of our lives, the ego has been operating in the background, subconsciously, left to its own devices, on what it thinks is good for us when it comes to our survival. From the moment we were born, we began to experience the stories of life. Some were pleasant and happy stories, such as that birthday, or that treat we got, or when mom and dad told us how good we were when we did something that pleased them. Some stories were unpleasant and painful. Maybe when our baby sister or brother was born, they got all the attention and we didn't. Or there was bullying with other kids. Or we were scolded because we did something that mom and dad were not pleased about. Now, as part of the survival process, this operating system, the ego, did not want us to feel these painful experiences, only the pleasurable ones. See, remember, pain indicates a threat to our survival. And emotional pain is no different from real pain for the ego, even though it may not be a real threat. One can understand that the ego would ensure we did not put our hand on a hot plate again if we got burnt once before, but it also does the same for emotional pain. When I did this, I got into trouble, so don't do it again. This is what the ego will say from the deep subconscious. It will develop behaviors to avoid any form of pain. And at this young age, the subconscious operating system was in full control, as the higher brain functions of the child were not yet fully developed. So our ego took control of our behavior, and it did its best to keep us away from those painful experiences and ensured we had more pleasurable ones. We would do less of what upsets mom and dad and do more of what pleases them maybe. We would try and compete for attention with baby sister or baby brother, or maybe try and be accepted by the other kids around us. By the time we were 5 or 6, our ego developed a whole series of subconscious behaviors or habits and patterns as coping mechanisms around these painful experiences, which usually activated our base fears. We call these habits and patterns personality traits. So as you can see, this operating system, our ego, is the foundation of our personality. These habits and patterns can be classified as either strengths or weaknesses, and we will explore strengths later on in the course. So as we grew into adulthood, we have this operating system still doing its job in the background, influencing up to 95% of our behavior, including those around our base fears. It uses the urge or hook, as I mentioned previously, or we could also say the desire or feeling to influence our behavior. Remember that story about the subconscious urge to eat the chocolate cake when I felt the pain of rejection after that breakup? Well, we could also say that it was through that desire or feeling to avoid or numb the pain of rejection that I wanted to eat the chocolate cake. And as you'll recall, these desires, urges, or feelings may not always be conducive to our long-term state of well-being. As I continually eat more chocolate cake to avoid or numb the rejection, I may look in the mirror down the line, notice my weight gain, and feel even more rejected. Now in the next topic, we'll explore some examples of these feelings, urges, desires created by the ego to influence our behavior to avoid these fears. And as it does so, may lead us on the rocks. So as we finish off this topic, I'll leave you with a wonderful quote. I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. So I'll see you in the next topic, and until then, take care and stay aware.